Welcome friends to another r/ProRevenge video. Today we've got a great story of messing with roommates during finals week, but first a story from G-Train Express, monitoring my movements, enjoy the spam. About 4 years back I had a colleague who worked in a different office to me. He was a nice enough guy, but just generally annoying on emails. Anyway, one week he was down in my office for work and sitting next to me, and I caught a glimpse that he had tagged me on Skype for business. So whenever I went offline, away, or active, he got a pop-up notification. For whatever reason that really bugged me. I don't like the idea that someone's monitoring my movements. Once he went back to his home office, every time I left and came back to my laptop, or was bored, or on a call, including with him, I'd flick my status on and off 10 to 20 times. I knew every time he was getting these pop-ups, and he couldn't really say anything to me without admitting it. I still chuckled to myself about it to this day. Now I'm not sure if Skype has a setting like this on by default, but I know I've used programs before or apps that when you're using it and somebody comes online, you do get a little pop-up notification. If you're using a program that notifies you every single time somebody comes online or offline that's on your friends list or associated to your account, do you think it's weird to like having that on? Getting those notifications every time somebody comes online or offline? Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Our next story is from Week Assignment 5091. Green Day helped me get a vindictive neighbor to move. This happened about a decade ago, but I still get satisfaction when I think of it. So around 10 years ago, we had to move out of the duplex we shared with my father-in-law. He was a jerk and a bully and had no boundaries. Because he owned the duplex, he thought he could do whatever he wanted, including walking into my unit unannounced while I'm barely clothed. So we left and moved into a beautiful place a good distance away from him. After I pushed father-in-law down the stairs when he threatened me for the last time when my husband was gone. The tenants who lived in my unit had been there for over a decade, and it was a woman in her 50s and her physically disabled son. They were very quiet. The man who lived under me was absolutely pissed that he lost his peace when a family of 4 and a dog moved in. It was a huge place, and realistically, if it hadn't been us, we were friends of the owner, it would have been another family who also wouldn't have been as quiet as the previous tenants. The downstairs tenant's name was Frank, and he was a threatening bully from the start, except he wouldn't complain to me if my husband was home. He would wait until his work truck was gone and catch me outside alone when checking the mail. He was a huge guy too. I'm only 5'2" and weighed maybe 140 pounds back then. So we moved away from one jerk, only to find a bigger one who seemed to try anything he could to get us in trouble. When he realized he couldn't make us move or make my kids, 4 and 6 at that time, be any more quiet than they already were, they lived in an upstairs unit and knew not to be too loud indoors, he moved on to my dog. Within a couple of weeks of moving in, we started getting bylaws showing up about my loud dog. My dog wasn't loud and only barked when someone knocked on the door, which didn't look great for me when the bylaw showed up. Then he started recording the dog barking for that minute someone knocked and would call the landlord and play it every time I brought my kids to school. So I left my webcam on, and a friend watched and listened while we were gone, and the dog didn't make a peep. A few days later, I get another bylaw visit, and they gave me a fine. Except I hadn't left the freaking house in days, and the dog barked only once when I got a package delivered. Now on to my revenge. Mwahaha. After I get another fine from bylaw that was significantly higher than the first, most cities' bylaw department only responds when there's a complaint lodged. They don't go looking for people to ticket, and with absolutely no proof to justify a $230 fine, I had enough. We'd been there only a month by this time, and this jerk made my life even more difficult than my father-in-law did. I decided that I'm going to leave for the day with my kids and my dog. I put them in the car, and then went back upstairs to lay my subwoofer on the floor exactly in the middle of his apartment downstairs. I put Green Day's greatest hits on full blast, pressed play, and left. That freaker wanted noise, wanted to complain and get me fined for no reason? Well, I was about to give him a reason. I knew my landlord was out of the country on vacation, so there wouldn't be anyone calling to harass me from Greece. I was gone for about 6 hours and the album was on repeat. I must have really pissed him off because by the weekend, he had moved out. I get major satisfaction from winning this game, still over a decade later. I'm just struggling to understand how they can record the dog barking, maybe a few times a week, and just that sole recording of the dog barking when the door's being knocked on is enough to get OP fined over and over again. Bylaw clearly didn't care about getting the true facts of the situation because the neighbor's recording probably shouldn't have gone for more than a couple minutes at most. I highly doubt the dog was barking for more than 5 minutes. So to me, the fact that this neighbor got away with reporting them and OP getting a fine for it because they stopped to take a 2-minute recording every so often when the dog barked is kind of an outrage to me. Our next story is from Colonia Venus. Glassdoor infuriated me by making me sign up and give them personal info to view something, so I left them a bad employee review on their own site. Listen, this might sound a bit extra, but have you tried to use Glassdoor before? If you haven't, go try it. I'm serious. See how far you get before it harasses you into signing up for their site. But I can just simply sign in with my Google account, you say? Wrong. It won't let you back to the viewing page after signing in. No, it forces you to give them details about your job title, your company, your location, your salary, your years of experience. Although there is thankfully a skip button when it gets to the review part, it's hard to even notice it, and it tries to force you into it again later. Okay, I kind of get it, they need data. That's what makes the website useful, but here's the problem. I don't have a freaking job. I graduated college last year, had some health issues, etc. So what the heck should I enter when it's forcing me to answer questions about my job? Is it ironic that they're withholding information that could help me get a job because I don't already have a job? Or is it prejudiced against the unemployed? I can't decide. I'll tell you what. Job title, male prostitute. Company, Glassdoor. Location, Las Vegas, Nevada. Salary, $69,000. All ratings, 1 star. Pros, 5-word minimum. None. There are no pros. Cons, my talents are truly going to waste at Glassdoor. No one wants to hire me to screw them because the company's website is the most atrocious thing they've ever had to interact with on the internet. I don't blame them, frankly. How can they trust me to give them a good time if this is the company I represent? No one's having a good time on this website. No one. Glassdoor, get a freaking UX team. If you have one already, get a new one. This crap stinks. Advice for management? Fix your website. Forcing people into signing up and giving reviews to simply view a page that they got to from a search engine is really freaking obnoxious and completely unhelpful for people looking for their first job. You're forcing people to give false data when you do this. How's that helpful for anyone? Give people the option to skip it. No one wants to sign up for your site when you force them. Sincerely, a male prostitute who just handed in his resignation. I seriously doubt it'll ever make it to their page of public reviews, which looks rigged as crap by the way, but I just hope that some employee that is complicit in this heinous design choice reads it. My review fell short of the level of copy pasta vibes I was hoping for, so if anyone wants to improve upon it in the comments, please do. In conclusion, Glassdoor's website has the freaking temperament of a sleazy frat boy who won't take no for an answer. Wait, no. Glassdoor's website is the virtual embodiment of an arrogant, crusty old businessman who invites his young female intern to a private meeting to discuss promoting her, only to say that it's contingent upon her performing an inappropriate favor. Yes, I'm still angry. I've dealt with too many dysfunctional websites lately, so this was the last straw. Apologies that this isn't really a triumphant petty revenge story. In all honesty, this is partially an attempt at a cathartic writing exercise, and partially the next step in my campaign to tarnish their name. No offense intended to male prostitutes, frat boys, businessmen, or anyone else. Full offense intended to the employees at Glassdoor who made their website like this. Screw them. Screw them. Having spent my fair share of time on the internet, I totally agree with OP. I haven't experienced Glassdoor, but a website that I've visited quite a bit that infuriated me is Quora. Do you know how many times I've found a question that is answered on Quora, and as soon as you go there, you see one answer, and then it's like, sign up. So at some point you give in, you're like, okay, I use this site a little bit, you sign up for it, and then it starts asking you for Quora Plus, and then there's certain answers on certain questions that you can only read if you have Quora Plus. I sit there looking at that and I'm like, who's going to pay so and so much a month to read a slightly better answer? Also, unless you like giving away all the personal information attached to your Google account or any other account, I would advise against signing in using your Google account, or a lot of times you'll see like sign in with Apple, sign in with Facebook. When you sign in with those things, you're giving them access to all your personal info attached to those accounts. By the way, if you're enjoying these stories, make sure to hit those like and subscribe buttons down below so you never miss any of my daily videos. Our next story is from Nana J888. I gave someone the wrong answer on her test. Okay, this happens back when I was in high school, when I was 16 or 17. I'm now 23. I'm pretty good at English. I came from a country in Asia, so English isn't very common. So one time, me and Tina, my friend, we played with water. Tina sprayed me with water and accidentally sprayed someone else. Let's call her Thea. We apologized, but she decided to throw a racist comment and called us stupid Chinese in my native language. Fast forward, we're on our very last test before graduation. Thea sat behind me and kept calling me asking for an answer to the English tests. So being the petty person, I gave it to her, all the wrong answers. The test results came back, I got a 94 on my tests, and guess who got 60 on theirs? I don't blame OP one bit for doing what they did here. They made an accident, they accidentally sprayed water on Thea, and instead of just being the bigger person and accepting their apology for an honest mistake, they turn around and get racist and nasty. Well, down the road, it's no surprise that OP's not going to just bail you out on your test after all that. This next story is from Beard Guitar 123. Neighbor called code enforcement on me about my lawn without even speaking directly with me first. Now I'm really gonna piss him off. A little background info. My wife and I purchased our house a few years ago, and the day we moved in, our neighbor Roger called the cops on us for moving in too loud. We weren't playing music or even talking amongst ourselves, just my wife and I, moving our belongings into our new house. Cops came, I explained that I was just moving in, and they apologized for bothering us. Roger, in all his retired proud boy glory, comes out of his house immediately after they left to let us know that he's the one that called the cops, and in more words, says he's setting the tone for our new life. Even still, we were super cordial with this guy because we wanted to make a good impression in our new neighborhood. It's our first home and it was important to us to make it homey. About a year or so later, our first son's born. We let our property fall to the back burner while we adjusted to parenthood, and a few newspapers piled up in our driveway and, in the rain, sort of melt onto our driveway. All on our property. Roger comes knocking on our door to complain. I tell him I'm sorry and that we let it get away from us. I explain that we have a newborn son and I would get to it ASAP. He digs in and starts telling me how when he was a new father, he didn't let anything affect his property, and he tells me I'm being lazy. I said, then why don't you pick it up if you're so worried about it? To which he says, no, I want you to pick up the freaking mess. I was trying to be semi-cordial still because I'm not interested in unnecessary conflict with my neighbor, so I told him fine, I'll get to it, and he left. Later that year, Roger comes over one day to ask if he can trim the tree that hangs over my fence onto his side of the fence. And I'm fine with that, so I say no problem. And he casually mentions how one time when a 17-year-old kid, friends with his delinquent drug addict son at the time, broke into his garage, he hit him in the head with a baseball bat until he was R-word, and the police came, and he was cleared of all responsibility because it was a break-in. He's smiling and laughing while telling me this. Noted, I'm thinking to myself, this guy is a freaking piece of crap psychopath. Well, it's a couple years later now with a few more minor run-ins, but nothing too significant. And my wife and I just had our second son 1 month ago. About 10 days ago, son isn't even 3 weeks old at this time, I get a notice on my door saying my lawn is in violation of my city's code. I mowed it 2 days before my son was born, so it's been about 3 weeks since I mowed and it's been raining since. I have 48 hours to comply. I call the number on the card and no answer. So I call the non-emergency line to verify what my responsibility is because of the vague wording on the door hanger. It's because one of the grass types on my lawn, growing very sparsely like 1 blade per square inch, is over 12 inches tall. The majority of the grass was like 2 to 3 inches long, but there was another type there as well that grew faster. I told them that I'm a new father and asked for an extension to deal with it later. They said, don't even worry about the lawn, just take care of the baby. So now, with some newfound confidence, I mow my lawn into a spiral shape, leaving lots of grass remaining as a middle finger to whoever, we knew who it was at this point in the story, right? Called the cops on me about my lawn. A couple days later, Roger talks to me over our shared backyard fence and asks about my lawnmower and if it's busted or something. I told him, no, I just have more important priorities than mowing my lawn, and tell him about my new son, and then I asked if he was the one that called the cops on me about it. He says he called code enforcement, but not on me. He called on my new neighbors on my other side, a really nice Mexican family who's always diligent about their lawn and always outside working on their new property. He says code enforcement must have happened to notice my lawn when they went to follow up on his call next door. At this point, I say something along the lines of, look, I'm a pretty freaking cool guy. If you have a concern about my property, then you can speak with me directly. He swears up and down that he didn't call on me and that it was just a coincidence. Whatever. About a week after that, yesterday, he knocks on my door and I already know what's coming. I answer the door kind of chuckling and greet him. He's kind of chuckling too at this point because it's freaking ridiculous. He says, hey, so you said I could talk to you if I had an issue with your property. I tell him, yeah, by all means. He gestures to my lawn and asks what it's about. I say, it's kind of like a middle finger to whoever called code enforcement on me. He is irate. Says if it's a middle finger to him. I stop him and remind him that he told me that he didn't call them on me, so he shouldn't feel targeted. He ignores me and restarts his sentence the same way again. So I cut him off again and I say, I specifically am telling you it's not a middle finger to you, Roger. He says, if it's a middle finger to me, then this means war. Over what? I ask him, laughing. He's getting bigger and huffier by the second and tells me I'm a lazy piece of crap and my property's in shambles and that all the other neighbors mow their lawn. I remind him that I have a newborn son and that my lawn can suck my you-know-what for now. He puffs up as big as he can and says, I never had this issue when I was a new father. I told him I don't give a crap about what he did as a dad. Ironically enough, his drug addict son lives in the house on the other side of him and causes trouble in the neighborhood regularly. Cars peeling out, people screaming at each other, drug addicts always waiting outside, etc. Now he tells me that he's going to call code enforcement on me every day, and I tell him to get the freak off my property. He says, move me. So I tell him I'm calling the cops, and he says, do it. So I grab my phone and start dialing. He walks to the sidewalk and keeps yelling at me about how I'm lazy and not fit to own my property. Cops come and speak with us. Very anticlimactic. They did make sure to let him know that he needs to get off my property when I say so, and that's all I wanted from them. Tomorrow I'm going to take my hedge trimmers and mow my maze down to 11 inches. Screw you, Roger. All I know is it would suck to live next to a neighbor like this that doesn't let you get away with anything that's, slightly out of code. Frankly, I'd say this is worse than just living in an HOA community. It definitely takes a certain kind of person to keep living next to a neighbor like that, somebody that actually thrives on allowing the neighbor to get more and more upset. All I know is in this day and age with everything that's gone on, I don't know if I would feel greatly comfortable continuing to piss off this neighbor, because first of all, you heard what they said about what they did to the kid in the garage. Who knows one day if you can finally just get this guy to totally snap and he does something really serious. Our next story is from Revolutionary P833. Don't like me smoking weed? Okay. So a little backstory. I smoke weed to help deal with my mental health issues, but I found myself in a dilemma. Whenever I smoke in my room, the smell seeps through the door crack and makes the house smell. So I tried finding a nice scenic place, but when it's cold or raining, you kinda wanna smoke in the comfort of your own house. I started smoking in my backyard only at nighttime because the neighbors to my right have kids and I wanna be respectful. The other night, I was smoking outside and my neighbor to the left were outside talking. So I come out at the usual time and mind my own business. There's a 6-foot wall separating me and them, so I give them their space and I have mine. I come back inside and I have my window slightly ajar, and I can hear them arguing about calling the police and saying, "I don't want to smell that crap." 10 minutes later, the police knock on my door and ask to have a look around the house. 5 minutes before, I ran outside, found a fence, and wedged all my weed stuff inside it. They have a look around and found nothing. I'm now seething. I'm in Ireland where weed is 100% illegal, so I could get into some serious trouble. We're grown adults. If you have a problem with me smoking weed, come and tell me, which I'd appreciate more than you calling the police. Time for the revenge. Weed may be illegal in Ireland, but CBD bud isn't. You may be wondering, what is CBD bud? Simplified, it's basically CBD, but it looks and smells like weed. I rolled up a nice fat joint, stood right next to the wall separating me and them, and started smoking away. 4 minutes later, the police knock on my door and immediately smell what seems to be weed. I kindly pointed out that it's CBD bud and completely legal as long as it contains less than 0.3% THC, the thing that gets you high. They agree and leave. The neighbors hate me because the police can't do anything. Moral of the story, please be an adult and communicate your feelings. Let's kind of put ourselves in the neighbor's shoes here. If you're outside talking late at night and your neighbor goes out into their backyard and starts smoking, and you can kind of smell it creeping over the wall, and let's say it's something that's bothering you or you don't personally like, would you yourself go over there and ask them to stop smoking outside if they can tell you're outside? Or do you think it is understandable for them to get upset about it and call the cops rather than go over there and try to talk it out with a neighbor? Let me know what you guys think down in the comments. Our next story is from Big McLarge Huge 7. Parked my car in the street, got a removal notice. So we need to have the main water line into the house replaced. So they need to come out and mark all the utility lines before they dig for the new pipe. I moved my old car to the street in front of my house on Thursday. On Saturday, I had a removal notice from the city for an unattended vehicle in place for 48 hours. Keep in mind, the car is registered to my address and was parked in front of my house. Our neighbors across the street had to have called it in, and that pisses me off. When they first moved in, they left a work truck in front of our house for a month, then another month shortly thereafter. Was I happy? No. Did I call the police? No. His work truck, along with the other neighbors' vehicles, are okay, even having people visiting in a trailer or RV for 2 to 3 weeks at a time. So I moved the car back up into my driveway, but I did move the old toilet that's been sitting next to the house, waiting for bulk trash pickup. Didn't like looking at my old car? Enjoy looking at the toilet, jerk. When they come to trench, I plan on moving the car into the same spot, only in my yard. City can't remove it on your property. Enjoy looking at it. I was gonna donate it to charity soon, but now I think I might keep it a bit longer. Those neighbors are total jerks. It would honestly piss me off to no end to realize that they did that. And frankly, I might want to be petty and do the same thing that OP did too, just leave it parked there right in the yard, make them look out their windows and study it for a good while, maybe even a month or two, and then finally donate it to a good cause. Our next story is from RetroFansid6581. Revenge is a dish best served cold. About 20 years ago, I worked in a local computer shop. There was only a handful of staff and it was very much a friends and family run place. The boss had an acquaintance who would come visit him. Let's call him Dave. He would be in the back area with all of us along with the stock, CPUs, RAM, hard drives, GPUs, etc. Because we were all friends, stock checking and keeping was very lax, but we trusted one another so it wasn't a problem. But suddenly things were going missing and we couldn't work out what was going on. We all suspected it was Dave, but couldn't be sure. Around that time, there was a very popular screensaver doing the rounds. It was a very photorealistic 3D aquarium screensaver by Jim Sachs, and everyone wanted it on their PC. I had it on my work PC, and when Dave saw it, he immediately asked for a copy, to which I refused. He grumbled about it and then left. I then had the idea of catching him out. I fired up Visual Basic and made a quick program called Aquarium Screensaver and compiled it with a standard Windows type setup wizard. The setup looked very legit. I then saved it to a floppy, yes, a floppy, and wrote Aquarium Screensaver on the disk. I then put it on the side and left it. The next day, when I got to work, the disk was missing. I asked the boss if Dave had been in, and he had. Now, as you can imagine, I didn't write a screensaver. In fact, I wrote an app to delete all the files and folders on any computer that installed it. In the setup terms and conditions, it clearly explains that this is what would happen, and the user agrees to this before installing. Later that day, we get a call from Dave asking to speak to me. Dave asked if I had any problems with the screensaver, as his computer would no longer boot. I said no, it was fine for me, and to perhaps try it on his other computer. A few days later, one of the other staff told him I had made this program, and he stormed into our shop to face off with me, but soon backed off when I reminded him I hadn't given him the screensaver, so he proved he was happy to steal something, and we got petty revenge. It's honestly a darn smart way to catch a thief like that. If you know something as far as computers go that they really desire, you just happen to have an installer or a CD or a DVD lying around that contains that file supposedly, and it's no surprise that Sticky Fingers Dave is the one who took it. If the suspected thief wants something, so you go ahead and plant it, it would be no surprise if all of a sudden that suspected thief now suddenly has that exact thing they were asking about, and the one you planted was missing. Our next story is from IVAGM. Make me stay at work for an extra hour? I'll sleep through it. So this happened a while back, but I was retelling the story yesterday, and my friend called me petty. Obviously, I saw this as reasoning to post it here. I worked customer support from home at my last job. We didn't get paid overtime because it's from home, or some other BS. One day, at the last 50 plus minutes of my shift, my connection dropped for long enough to kick me out of the VPN the company uses. I could not connect again to that VPN due to a technical issue, but I still had internet. I reported this to my boss so that she would let me go for the day and I could just stay for an hour more the next one. My boss instructed me to stay because I was logged into the systems and could help out in other areas that was not talking to the clients. She told me that despite me staying till the end of my shift and helping out, I would still have to do overtime the next day because my task for the day was to contact customers, not help out in other areas. I couldn't work my task, but I was forced to stay and work on other tasks, and on top of that, I would have to work overtime another day. Basically, I wouldn't get paid for the hour I did work because it wasn't logged, nor for the other hour because it was logged as overtime, which was unpaid. No thank you. Cue my petty revenge / malicious compliance. I finished off my shift that day at a bit later than 5 p.m. However, my boss reported officially that I'd worked until 4 p.m. due to a technical issue, and logged an hour of overtime for me for another shift. What she didn't realize was that the other shift had a different task. Not contact customers, but do internal work on tickets and such. This work isn't heavily monitored by the minute as the one with the customers. So the morning of my overtime shift, I logged into the system and fell blissfully back asleep for an hour. My productivity for the day went significantly down as they track that, but I was logged and working on some really tough internal cases. No one could say anything. I was one of their best workers, the only one on my team that was fast and competent, whose productivity was great. Heck, they promoted me because of it, with a 4% raise in salary, which is an absolute joke here, as average is 15 to 25%. So they lost more money by trying to cheat me out of 2 working hours, to be honest, and they lost my respect, as I ended up quitting a month later. Frankly, that's one of those jobs that you do work at for a while, but you realize the amount of work and dedication you put into that job will never be respected by the people actually overseeing that job, both in just how they treat you as a human and also compensation. Just because you're working from home doesn't mean it's not overtime. And our final story of the day is from Fan Commercial 1802. My college roommates needed to chill. Quick background, my final year at university, I got divorced and ended up rooming with a bunch of random younger dudes I'd never met. At the time, I was working at a nighttime maintenance job on campus. Think basic electrician and plumbing work. My roommates were all quite religious. Not a problem, I also am in my own way, but not attending their church was a real sticking point they couldn't get over. It led to many heated and boring discussions. So in petty revenge, every morning when I had the apartment to myself, they all had morning classes, I'd go into someone's room and unwire an outlet. one by a desk or wherever their phone or laptop charger was. I capped everything off, it was safe and up to code. I didn't need an arson charge. Naturally, they'd complain to the apartment complex. We'd get a notice that maintenance would be entering on such and such date and time. I'd go back in and connect everything back up before the maintenance guy came. Eventually, the complex staff decided that our apartment was just full of it, so they took longer and longer to respond. So my final parting gift was to turn off the natural gas to the water heater for finals week. Nothing like an ice-cold shower before exams. To be fair, I bet an ice-cold shower before exams would actually be pretty decent. Like, I'm imagining you want to feel woken up and kind of engaged, and like, yeah, it's jarring, but you're pretty awake after an ice-cold shower. Everything else, though, is really smooth. But with that being said, that's all the time we have for today. Now, if you want to hear another revenge story that was even more insane than the ones in this video, click on the left video, or if you missed my latest video, click on the right. But with that said, I'll see you all next time with some more stories.